Hi everyone, and thanks for being with me. I'm going to do something that's really different for me. I'm going to talk about retirement and what that's meant to me. And I know that the demographics of the people that watch my videos are usually over 55 and mostly male, I hasten to add. And I know that some of the people that do watch my videos, are those people that are probably thinking about retirement or have retired, and so I want to talk about something different. Normally, I talk about things that are political because that's kind of my thing. That's where I come from. Social issues, in particular, I wanted to discuss, but the main area of my life that's impacted me the most has been my retirement. And it's been an interesting experience to say the least. So I wanted to take this opportunity to have a conversation about it, if you like. Now, one of the reasons there's many things that I need to talk about, and I guess the overview is that I need to tell you that I retired in on the 1st of July last year, which means I've been retired now for about 15 months at the recording of this video. And it's been a fascinating and interesting period, but not necessarily a pleasant one. And one of the reasons for that, I think, is that I, for over 30 years, for about 35 years, I worked as a therapist and working with people with a range of issues, anything from family relationships through to domestic violence, which is a family relationship, to child sexual abuse, to um, working with parents whose children have been removed by the Department of Child Protection, and a whole host of other things. I've written 25 programs, uh, self help programs from understanding anger to divorce and separation to anxiety and stress to workplace bullying. I've done heaps and heaps of work over that period of time. And only yesterday, in fact, I went through a lot of DVDs that I'd recorded some 20 years ago that I'd put together about the work I'd done up until that period, which incorporated many programs. And it was an interesting reflection on the amount of work that I'd done. Now, my point is that I've I've left that work behind once I retired. That the work I'd done had a lot of meaning to me. I'm not suggesting that it had meaning to the people that I worked with. I'd like to think that it did, but I'm not suggesting that it necessarily did. But I did the best that I could. I was late into the field. I was 39, 40 when I went back to university. Um, I graduated. Prior to that, I worked a lot with, I did some 6 years with Lifeline, which is why I went off and did my university degree. And so I'd been counselling for a long time before I actually went to university. I got into the field that I wanted to get into, which was therapeutic counselling. I became an accredited mental health social worker here in Australia. I was one of the first persons to do that, to get into that program. And I had a private practice which for years thrived through employees assistance programs, through a lot of contract work. It was mostly contract work. It took me to some really interesting and fascinating places around Australia, which I thoroughly enjoyed to some extent, but I found particularly challenging in others. In fact, one of the most interesting things I could say about my work was that the areas in which I earned the most money were the least satisfying. And the work that I appreciated the most was the one for which I often didn't even charge. So, don't know what that tells you about me, but that was the reality, unfortunately. Now, or fortunately, one of the things that I've discovered since I've retired was that I haven't, in a sense, missed that work. I haven't missed the clients. not being faced with people's issues on a daily basis or having to think about them, which I would do every day, and to try and plan what I needed to say and the meetings that I would have, and particularly when I was working in the child protection area, how often I was confronted by my own colleagues who were terrible social workers, a lot of them, and who needed to be confronted, and how standing up for the clients in that environment was a continual struggle, but needed to be done. I was the only person who was doing it. No recognition from anybody in relation to that, not particularly from my colleagues, and particularly from the peak body for the ASW. No one ever really acknowledged it. So that was fine. I left all that behind. There is some resentment that I've never been recognised for any of the work that I'd done. But to be honest, that's no big deal. I just simply did what I had to do when I had to do it. Set up a child protection party, a political party to help deal with the issues around child protection here in Australia. Set up a foundation to work with families whose kids were removed and so on. And a lot of that was full of trauma and dissatisfaction in terms of some of the people I was working with, and a whole host of things. But that brings me to retirement. So when I chose to retire, the reality was that I was pretty burnt out. That working continually as I had for many years with other people's problems often didn't give me a chance to work on my own to some extent. And throughout that journey, there were a whole range of issues. I'm very fortunate that I had a wife who's an academic who has supported me greatly throughout all of that. And I've got 5 kids who have been incredibly supportive as well. But at the end of the day, leaving it all behind was fine. But then I had to wonder about what it was that was going to fill the gap. What did I need to do in order to feel contented, to feel satisfied, to feel that, not necessarily a gap of being needed, because that's never been really an issue for me, but certainly my life, 30 odd years, had been around what other people required of me, and me being there for them when needed, and developing my own skills and all the other things that were needed to be an effective social worker. So I've done all of that. So what follows? Now, for many of you out there that are thinking about retirement or have been retired, who've worked in an environment whereby it was taxing mentally, not physically, but mentally and emotionally, it was extremely taxing. In fact, there was a period in my practice where I used to have this sort of breakdown every 6 months, and I had to work through all of that and deal with the emotions and everything else, which actually helped to inform me about how I wanted my practice to be, in fact. And supervision became very important to me, and being able to talk about my issues became extremely important as well. So I did all of that, and then there was the vacuum. So I had a YouTube channel, which I've been sort of dabbling in for many years, and I had Child Protection Party channel, which I've been putting up videos after videos, and Facebook and all that sort of stuff, and been trying to get that happening. But I really hadn't dedicated anything to my own channel. And so I started doing that as of last year, and it just dribs and drabs. It's grown as I talked about political issues and social issues and that sort of stuff. And I've become more and more enthusiastic, I guess, about this sort of work that I'm now doing than I have about anything else. And it's odd because I'm just sitting here in this room with this screen behind me, which has given a false impression as to where I am. But it's quite pleasant, I hasten to add. But and then producing videos and just talking to you, I guess, which is a far different environment than what I'm used to, where I'm interacting with people and asking questions primarily and exploring their experience. So then I had to finish all of that and start to explore my own and what that meant. And retirement wasn't as easy as I thought it would be. because it was about the vacuum and how I was going to fill that vacuum and with what. So the YouTube stuff and my camera and my lights and my computers and stuff was all part of that process. But I don't know whether it was all that satisfying. So my wife and I chose that to do a bit of travelling. So we bought a new car, we paid off our house, we'd done all that stuff. Finances were looking okay. Chose to go um, overseas last year because my wife was going over to a conference to the UK. That was fine. But there was still, and I visited my son who lives in Ireland. That was all fine, but never ever really felt satisfied. Like, we've been to the UK before and don't necessarily enjoy the place. Met up with some old friends, and that was great. But and meeting up with my son in Ireland was fantastic. But there was something missing from it all. And then we came home after a disaster when we missed a flight and had to pay thousands of dollars to get another flight. It was a mess. So came home, tried to settle down, decided to take a trip, drive up to along the coast of Australia, which we did to a certain point. Got really tired with that, tired of going to motels, tired of trying to put videos together while we were away. Everything that we did was tiring. So I came to the conclusion that retirement sucks if you don't know what it is that you plan to do when you leave it behind. And that was my big problem. I had these ideas about what I wanted to do, travel, which we did, YouTube, which I'm doing, and leaving behind the drama and the trauma and the working with people endlessly and getting no result from any of the work that I did. That it was soulless type work in a way. And so perhaps leaving that behind felt like a good thing. It was certainly the right thing at the time because I was just burnt out. So what does that mean? Well, frankly, we have to. I think, there are statistics, and I haven't got them in front of me, but there are statistics that say that men are more likely to pass away 5 or 6 years after they've retired simply because they lose interest in life. They lose a focus on what's important. And my role, or my job, I guess, since I've retired, has been to try and find whatever that purpose might be. That my life has been, for at least the last 35 years, has been purposeful and has been focused. And I've been pretty dogged and made a number of sacrifices that, unfortunately, my family have had to work through as well because I was so focused on what I was planning to do. That when all of that comes to an end, then what do you focus on? And with that, I found that I became depressed. That having left everything that had meaning behind, no longer being the social worker. I still see myself as a social worker, but not in a practical sense as I have over the years. And I left that behind, and therefore I felt sad, and I needed to do this. I needed to acknowledge what I'd lost, and that I think that there are many people, and it doesn't matter whether you do manual work throughout your life and you're just physically exhausted from all of that, or whether you're doing emotional work, or whether you have another form of profession and you leave that behind. But you need to acknowledge, which I've now been able to do, what it is that I left behind. And I've had countless conversations with my wife about the regrets that I've had, about the things I could have done differently, about the programs and the ideas that I'd had that I'd tried to implement but weren't successful at implementing them, and to acknowledge that our past is often full of all sorts of regrets and to some extent guilt and shame. And unless we can find ways to acknowledge that, it's going to be really hard to move on in retirement because those things linger. They sort of eat away at you like a pussy sore that needs to be lanced. And that to some extent we need to understand what it is that we've left behind, to deal with the grief that's associated with all of that and the regrets. And for me, my biggest regret was that as hard as I worked, and this sounds rather egotistical, so I do apologise, but it is the reality, and that is regardless of how hard I worked, I never ever received the acknowledgement that I needed, or that I thought I needed, or that I would have liked for any of the work that I did. And that is because a lot of people didn't understand, I guess, what that work was and how I went about it and what meaning that it had for me. And it wasn't until a couple of weeks ago I decided to go and see a colleague and just have a therapeutic session with her about what was happening. When I was talking about this, I found myself becoming extremely emotional. That, in fact, I couldn't believe where that emotion came from. I just burst into tears talking about the years of working and slogging and the sacrifices that I made, the sacrifices my family made, that I forced them to make because I was so dogged about learning what I needed to learn because I was so late in taking on this profession that I couldn't contain that emotion anymore. And so one of the reasons why I'm doing this video is because I think it's important to try. Well, I guess I still want to help people to understand what retirement may mean to them. That there may be these regrets and the guilt and the shame and the lost relationships and a whole lot of things that all come together once we choose to leave our work behind. So we need to acknowledge it. We need to understand it. We need to feel the shame and the guilt if there is any. And we need to reinvent ourselves. And this is the key to me. I've taken on this work. I've also taken on trying to understand new programs that will help me do my editing. So I use DaVinci Resolve, which is, anybody who knows DaVinci is quite an involved piece of software. And I want to learn more about that. I want to learn more about YouTubing and how to increase my subscription. So on that very topic, I'll just punch that in so that people can remember to subscribe to my channel if you don't mind. It will be a help in my, and I need I say it, in my retirement, it will be helpful. So, but try something new. The point for me is that when you get to retirement, you can think about, this is the end of my life because my work has had all the meaning. That was who I am. I developed myself as a social worker. This was who I was. This is who I became. Every aspect of my life was based on the principles and values and ethics of my profession, which was helpful to me and for which I'm very, very grateful, and which still exists with me to this day. But I've left behind a lot of stuff that had meaning as well, and I needed to understand what that meaning is. So I'm saying to you, if you have that experience, if you wonder, if you're heading towards retirement, I would suggest you plan ahead. Not simply get into a car, buy a caravan, travel around the world or travel around your country. But try and work out what meaning life had to you before that and whether you can implement some sort of meaning into the retirement period that you've got left. And the interesting thing is we don't know how long that's going to be. Since I've retired, I've had a couple of health scares, which haven't been all that much fun, and I'm still undergoing some tests around some of that stuff. So that was another issue that hit me. I've never bothered about going to a doctor all that often in the past. Now I suddenly retired and suddenly I've got some health issues. So there's another layer that you have to find the space to deal with, because physically we're changing. You know, I love playing golf, so I'm trying to play golf an extra day during the week, apart from Friday with my mates. So, you know, do other things, but make sure that they have meaning. It doesn't have to have the same meaning as when you're working, or the same purpose. So as I was saying, I'm trying to learn DaVinci Resolve. I'm trying to learn how to be a better vlogger, how to make better videos, how to enhance my presentation, all that sort of stuff. I'm trying to do things differently. I'm trying now to be courageous about the decisions that I make that's going to affect my life and my family's life for as long as that might be. And I need to make it better. Now, if you've got any thoughts about how you, if you're thinking of retirement, what sort of things you might do that might help you, please let me know in the comments section below, and please subscribe to my channel, because that will help me in retirement. Need I say any more? And I just need to say, I'm not making any money from YouTube, so that's no big deal. But let me know what you think about a pending retirement. Or even still, what do you think about your life in terms of the meaning that it has to you in relation to the work that you do? And it doesn't matter whether you're a tradie. I've got a lot of admiration for tradies, because they do things I can't do, or other sort of profession. But what sort of things do you think are important for you? Let me know in the comment section below. In the meantime, let me know what you think of this video. That would also be helpful as well. It's the first time I've ever attempted to do a video like this, so let me know what you think about that. In the meantime, I'll fill you in on more things that are happening to me in terms of this notion around leaving work. I'm going to think of another word apart from retirement. Reinvention, I think it's a good word. But let me know what you think in the comment section below. In the meantime, take care, look after yourselves, and more importantly, be safe.